So I had a revelation that came about from last week's video, which has led to this week's video. And I said in it, and I put the words over the screen at the point I said it. But when I was talking about a tension, like a tension that is felt, and giving your attention to, I noticed the synchronicity that they sound like the exact same thing. And I thought that that was an absolutely incredible subject to go into. And I keep being absolutely fascinated by word roots and etymology. And I think I mention this in every single video. And I keep thinking that my fascination with it is going to end at some point, but it only seems to increase. And I start to understand why it's so important to know where the words came from, because often those later meanings kind of get into connotations and get into some of our root beliefs that are the cause of those tensions. So the real root 10 means to stretch. And I suggest looking this up, and there's a word tendere. And so both attention and tension come from this, which means to stretch, and a whole bunch of other words. So if you look it up, you might get some insights. Tender, tend, intend. So what happens, this is where non-duality comes in. So to stretch, in order to do this, we have one infinite endless loop with no point and no tension on it. So in order to create tension, we have to have a point, and in order to have movement, you have to have a single point of reference where there is no movement. So movement in duality, and again in time, 2 points creates time. There's no experiential time, but thinking of a point and thinking of you being the thing that is the same from one point to the next. So you are the root duality. So this represents you, and this represents a single point. And so when we give our attention to something, we stretch our attention out towards it. And so this is creating you and creating the separation between the world. And so this gives rise to tensions and beliefs, which are thoughts that we repeatedly think, give rise to tensions in the body. And so even after we have understood, even on a completely felt level, that we are not the separate self, we still have these kind of underlying tensions in the body. And the tricky thing about it is that it's by giving our attention to them that we're able to get them to go away. And it's also by giving our attention to them that we perpetuate them. And so there's really no way in language to explain this except for if we feel they're a problem and we feel that we will be complete once we get rid of them, then we're continually holding that tension. We're actually creating that tension with our attention. But when we give it loving attention, and when we meditate, essentially what we're doing, and when we appreciate, and when we drop a thought and choose one that feels better, we are dropping this tension. And so in the world, in life, you will realize that a lot of things you do are stretching yourself, and then there's the release of it. It's like a roller coaster. It scares you, it's a big stretch, and then there's this oh my God kind of feeling. And so often we're looking for this. And so in all personal development, it feels amazing to start to raise your standards and start to believe that you could be more than what you are. But essentially, the reason that you want any of those things is to feel better in the having of them. And so when we create tensions to have them, we create a problem. However, The other thing that can happen, and now I'm getting really nuanced here, is when we really go for something, that fixed point that is us, that's right here, this fixed point, we really go for something, we realize that this fixed point is not fixed. We get it to move a little bit, and that feels amazing, and that can be one of the first kind of tip-offs that what we are isn't really fixed. And that's why so many people first really get into personal development and realizing their dreams or whatever kind of striving before they get into non-duality. You realize that once you let go of this fixed point that is your beliefs and what you believe you are, that without creating tension, you can still go anywhere. And so raising our standards is like a first step, that we don't have to have these sort of limiting beliefs. And yet, when we forget that it's not about becoming someone and like stretching ourselves, but it's how we feel that is the like defining that's what we truly want, that's directly what we truly want, then everything suddenly becomes so much more easily reached. So in my Wheel of Suffering video, I talk about movement, and I talk about how we continually spin around the wheel and we suffer in various ways and think that they're different, and in thinking and beliefs think that it's completely different, and don't see that we're making this one movement. So when we stretch ourselves, we can go from fear and we can go from desire and not see that it's the same movement. But when we relax our attention, then you see that that was the way out. And so in thinking and projecting ourselves out into thinking, we make this effort. And so this is not an effort when we're truly giving our attention, our focus to something that we want to be giving our focus to. That's creative attention. And you'll notice when it feels amazing when you're in that creative zone, when you're truly, truly interested and engaged and resonating with something. There is no tension, and yet you're sort of exploring. And exploration is kind of a big key with this. And so you have to have this sort of like open exploration and inviting those tensions and inviting the things that you're avoiding in. And this was another like funny word synchronicity I noticed too, is that avoid is like the meaning of the word came from a void. So literally what you are, your ability to focus, your eyeball and the pupil of your eye is like allowing light in. It's a void. That's what allows you to pinpoint and to focus on a single thing. So we cannot actually avoid anything. And so often it is that very void that's what those tensions are trying to, they're trying to say there's one point, and it's not a void, it's not an endless, infinite, it doesn't look like a very perfect circle here, but it's not an endless, infinite circle, but I'm this one point, and so I want to avoid the void. And I noticed with myself all these kind of feelings starting to come up, and how absolutely vague they actually were. And sometimes, and this may be like a completely personal thing, I don't know if other people experience this, but sometimes it would come up, it would come with an image of a place or some slight sort of memory or something, and it would feel, it was the same thing as sometimes I'd just have this image of a place or something that felt like a memory come in, and it would feel amazing or future possibility. But the same thing, I was starting to recognize these really like disgusting feelings coming up. and then noticing the tendency to want to think about how I was going to make my life complete in some way or something like that. And so just inviting those feelings in and realizing that they have no place to go at all, that wherever you go, there you are, can be an amazingly healing thing. And you start to realize too, like, I came up with this funny analogy that it's sort of like this cat lady who lives alone, and something starts to terrorize her and gets into her garbage, and that's like she can hear it outside at night. And she doesn't know what it is, and so she spends like weeks terrified of this thing. And then eventually she gets brave enough to look out, and she gets a glimpse of it and finds that it's a cat. And she realizes that it's the thing she loves. She's a cat lady. And so she wants to put food out for this cat, and she wants to start to adopt this cat. So suddenly she changes her mindset, and she gets sort of like overzealous about it. And she's like, here, kitty, kitty, kitty. And so that's kind of like been this analogy, and like the here, kitty, kitty, kitty thing has been something that's just like been playing through my mind when I start to recognize how I'm doing this, because we have so many like ingrained tendencies, and when you have these like held tensions, and we have various ones on various subjects. So Abraham Hicks says that your vibration, and this would literally be your vibration. So this would feel amazing, and this does not feel good at all. And so she says your vibration on any subject is where you last left it. It's being held wherever you last leave it. And so there are no separate areas in our life, and yet we still have to explore those things. And today I was at my parents' house, and I had my studio, and I worked there for years, and it wasn't until about 3 years ago that I moved it to where I live. And for whatever reason today, when I went out the door, that action, I like noticed this impulse to go directly to my studio, and like my mind like going towards like what I was gonna make. And it was the weirdest thing, and I realized that it was sort of this kind of old like belief or memory. And so we have all these things that our body has learned, and it's not our fault that we've learned through all these connotations and this language being used, and not really knowing what it meant, and not really knowing the underlying beliefs, not really questioning the underlying beliefs. And it is, if you look at it like an exploration to see what they are, because they truly are like the cat, they truly are something you love, and it's something that you want to invite in. So non-duality, you're not separate. So thought is always one thing in the field of awareness, but it seems as if it separates things as in two. But really, thought does nothing and can not do anything unless you believe it, and a belief is where it goes into feeling. And you'll notice sometimes when you wake up in the middle of the night, you will have been like believing dreams, and there'll be like this belief is very strong, and you may get anxious about things that normally in the day you'd never be anxious about, because you're not stressed out about it. And that can show you how strong belief is. And so belief goes into that feeling. So of course, when we relax that tension, it feels amazing. And so all progress is like coming out of that relaxed place and going to that relaxed place, because that's already the case. Our awareness is already completely allowing everything, completely aware of everything. And so as we become aware of the things that we don't want to look at, as we start to become curious enough to really see them, and it's like seeing the stick and thinking it's a snake. If you have the belief that you're afraid of snakes and you're looking out for them, you're more likely to mistake the stick for a snake. And it's not until you give it relaxed attention and curious attention that you'll be able to see that it's a stick. So just like with etymology, you don't know whether I said attention or attention anymore. And I don't know the difference either. And everything starts to get really loose and fluid, and we start to see how open to interpretation everything is. And you start to see, and you start to like integrate the more creative parts of the brain and the more like loose, dreaming, open poetry, art, representational, archetypal, and you can even start to experience some of these things that other people have regarded for like years and years, but you've given no attention to, and suddenly they come into your attention. And that's sort of like as you expand your awareness and your what you believe to be you, you start to encounter all these other things that still aren't quite it. And so relaxation is absolutely key, and yet you better relax. Doesn't get anyone anywhere. So actually like forgiving yourself for not being relaxed can be a huge help. And I think sometimes we come away with this like definitive thing that we need to do in order to release these tensions, and all that comes from the fear and anxiety that is it itself. And so you see this, like when you start to see yourself looping around, you realize that you're the one who's like pulling yourself out from a point and creating that movement.